Hello and welcome to At the Picnics show number 14. Danny, 14 shows. We're still here. People are watching us. What's going on?
God help me, they're obviously bored, or they need some light entertainment at home on a Thursday night.
Well, it's actually Wednesday tonight. We're a day early.
Wednesday.
Goes
to show how good my week's going.
And our very special guest, he's usually working on a Thursday night, and it's the one and only Ben Sporle, who from racing.com, and he's also calls at many racetracks. Great to have you on the show, Ben. I'm a little bit nervous because, you know, you're a bit of the famous face on racing.com, and we're the ones interviewing you tonight.
Yeah, it's a bit different being on the other end, but no, great to be with you. Sorry to throw out the roster. I do have to host at Pakenham on Thursday night, so appreciate you guys being able to juggle that in. But I'm going to have to listen to something this week because I generally pop this podcast on the way to the races to the picnics on the weekend. So I'm probably not going to listen to myself back, so I might have to find something else. But I will say I wasn't surprised that you needed to do Razor in two parts. He has a lot to say, but I'll try and keep it to one show for you.
He was a ripper. Now, Ben, I must say that I completely forgot about last Thursday night that you were hosting, and for everyone listening in, I sent you the message and said we'd like you to come on the show next Thursday night, and then you sent a message back to say that you were hosting the racing.com. So I flicked it over, and I must say, obviously you get on your phone during the breaks, mate, because you actually sent back a message after a break, and I just thought that was hilarious because I saw your phone sit next to you on the table.
Yeah, no, we get a few text messages. Generally, tips are what we like to see come through in the studio when we're working. But no, we've got the ad breaks, we've got people out on course and people ready markets. So it's pretty relaxed in the studio. We have time to flick a few messages or an important call in an ad break.
Love it, mate. Now, we don't have any congratulations this week, Danny, because we had no races last week with Deneran getting called off on Friday afternoon, which was very sad for the committee and all the people that went. But I still went on Saturday. They put on a fantastic day. So many people entered fashions in the field. Looking at the track, I don't know if you saw the photos that I posted on social media. It was beautiful and green and lush. Just those two spots, which unfortunately near the drains just wasn't good enough and wasn't safe enough to run on.
No, really disappointing, especially after what we'd sort of been told. And I was led to believe that horses had actually galloped across the surface and it had been considered safe. But obviously, those bits that you'd shown that didn't sort of come up to scratch. So unfortunately, it was a really big bummer. There were so many people looking forward to it, and after such a great thing. But the fashions on the field is fiercely contested up there, and look, we'll all be back next year, and hopefully I can terrorise them again into letting them open the rooms for us, and I can drag a crew up there and we'll camp up there again.
Yes, maybe in a way they're glad you didn't, Danny, because everything's still safe and not broken.
Oh, come on, I'm not that much of a walking disaster.
No, you're all right, Danny. Everybody loves you, Danny. Now,
God help them.
I'm trying to talk you up. Now, we've had some fantastic guests on this show. This gentleman, he's an absolute ripper. Look, for a guy, and I'm gonna pump you up here, Ben, who pretty much is in the spotlight.
Did he come in a pay review?
Yeah, mate. Look, anyone that knows this guy, he calls at the races, and in between races, he'll come and have a chat to anyone. Very approachable man, Ben. Really likable guy, and very much appreciated by all concerned. You know, you've got a passion for picnic racing as well. You know, you work for racing.com, but you do the tips every week. You've recently been down in King Island. We're gonna talk about that. But the one question, I've got to get this out of the way, Danny. I know who Ben barracks for. He's a passionate Richmond supporter, and that's why I love him even more.
And that's the only reason why you were getting it out the way earlier.
Absolutely. Get it out, get it out of the way. So my first question to you, Ben, is I can't keep track, but what tracks are you calling at these days?
It probably makes two of us, to be honest. It changes a little bit, but at the moment I'm still doing Balnarring and Woolamai, and then I get down to Yea and Alexandra, sort of down that Seymour way. Normally I do Merton on New Year's Day, but Adam Olzanski was really keen to tick that off his bucket list this year, so I was more than happy after doing plenty of Mertons on the hot deck out there to let Adam O do Merton this year. What else do I do? I'm probably missing one or two there, but they're sort of they're the main ones that I get around to each season, and as you say, love it.
Good.
Have
good
you
on-
done Druin yet?
I haven't called Druin. I have been to Druin. I've owned a winner at Druin and watched plenty of replays from there, Danny. And I've watched enough replays and gone once to go, probably not for me.
Is there anybody
For
on this show?
anyone who doesn't know, Druin
Yes.
has got so many trees around it. You are flat being able to get a fair view of the horses for any more than 1 or 2 strides every 100 or so metres. It's unique.
I haven't heard, and full respect to Druin and the race club and the community, but I haven't heard anyone on this show, Danny, that said anything favourable about Druin.
No, it's a great club. I love the place. And the food and entertainment there is great. It's a ripping day. But yeah, it's possibly not a dream for a race caller, put it that way.
Okay, that's yes. Now, Ben, what out of all those tracks, I don't want you to upset any of the committees at all, but I'm going to say that your favourite track's Balnarring.
I'll probably have to pick you up there. It's the hardest track that I call at, but it's the track that I most enjoy, and that's Yay.
Wow.
Picturesque on the hill there. It's the first one that I ever attended, going back all those years, and the one that I used to do with Jack Styring. And we've now named the box after him, the Jack Styring Tower a few weeks ago. And the committee have just always been really good. So it's a really tricky track to call at. The box is probably too low and too close to the fence, so they come really head on. Danny would know all about the fast lane, sometimes out wide. So there's a line of about 6 or 7 up the straight, and they come quite head on at you. So it's really tricky to call at, but it's probably my sentimental favourite one to go to. Woolamai and Balnarring are race callers' dreams. The callers' boxes are high, there's no trees, and they're great days out. I love them, but probably sentimentally, Yay's probably the favourite.
Fair enough
I've got
too.
to agree with you in a sense there, because I'm a big fan of Yay, because it is a really tricky joint to ride, but because of the sister Olive, I love it. But I think you might need to drag Paul up into the tower to actually get a real bird's eye view of it one day. So as you can actually see the head-on shot of them coming down the straight, it's really, really quite confronting. It's amazing to see sort of up that close.
I would love that, Ben. And
you are more than welcome anytime, mate.
And even if you're calling the race, and I promise I won't jump and grab the microphone off you and take over.
You may need to set stuff in his mouth to keep him quiet. I will warn you, at some stage he will say something, I'll guarantee it.
I'll bring up the gaffer tape, mate, so you can tape my mouth up. But I just love that, to see your perception of them coming towards you, mate. So next time you're at Yay and on there, mate, I'll take you up on that.
But one of the last times I had someone up in the caller's box with me was Toby Lake, who used to be a picnic jockey that Danny would be well aware of. And for a guy that used to ride horses for a living, he climbed to the top of the Woolamai Race Callers Tower and was absolutely, shitting himself of the height, it would be fair to say. It turned out the race was a dead heat. And I had a crack at a photo finish, and he turned to me when I turned the microphone off before I knew who won and said, "I think you got that wrong." And I said, "Well, you're never going back up again." Turned out we were both wrong because it was a dead heat. But no, always happy to have someone up in the callers box.
Oh, fantastic, mate. No, probably best when one of my horses isn't running, Ben, because you've probably seen there's some very embarrassing videos going around of me when my horses win. So we'll do it as a mutual race.
Sounds like a plan. I'm not much better watching mine sometimes, I can tell you that.
Tell me, Ben, how do you go calling your own?
Well, I've had a few picnic horses, as you would know, Danny, over the journey. I don't have one this year. It's a little bit tricky, and it's probably part of the reason that maybe I don't have one this year is that you probably don't enjoy it as much as you should. When you look at it as a race, as a neutral, you probably call a better race, but there's no denying when you've got a horse in the race, you've always got one eye looking for it. And if they run poorly, it can take the gloss off your day, and it can take your gloss off a good call too. So I've had 4 or 5 picnic horses and had plenty of fun, but I'm probably just happy watching on the sidelines as a neutral and cheering everyone else on now.
Now, with that, Danny, did you know that
Yep.
when the All Too Creedy Syndicate got together last year, we literally got the horse for nothing. I messaged Ben and said, "Do you want to jump on board?" And he said, "No, I'm full up, mate." I'm going to ask you in front of all our audience, Ben, are you sort of regretting that now?
I'll tell you what I am regretting. We're filming this on a Wednesday. Mick Bell come up to me in the truck car park at Balnarring a few weeks ago. I've always had a little bit of time for his stay or a sternishing, and I've interviewed him about it on the journey on .com, and he come up to me and said somebody had dropped out of a sternishing, and he said, "I'm glad I bumped into you because I know you've always been a fan." Anyway, don't feel hard done by because I knocked Mick back too. And I think it went to Woolamai maybe the following week and ran third. And we weren't sort of talking picnics. The horses got more ability than that. Anyway, just before we went to air here, it come out and won at Sandown at 30 or 40 to 1. So Mick was right. He did have the horse going well and a lot better than I thought he had it going anyway. But I love Mick, so I'll shoot him a text message tonight. He's a great fella, so I'm very pleased for him.
Good on you. So do you mind letting us know, Ben, what horses do you have at the moment? You've got the beautiful grey Not To Be Missed, who won the Echuca Cup last year. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, you are. I've handballed a couple off that probably weren't doing the job. So I've just got 2 at the moment. As you say, Not To Be Missed. He'll be back racing in a couple of weeks with Nick Ryan. He won at Flemington. Unfortunately, I was race calling at Yea that day and watched it up at the bar on a little TV, but that was good. And then I took the day off at Balnarring, actually, because we'd sort of set him for the Echuca Cup. That's so right. I got someone to fill in for me at Balnarring, and thankfully it all paid off, which doesn't happen in racing all the time. And I've got an unraced horse, 2-year-old with Julius Sandu, with some breeders of mine that we've sort of had a little bit of luck together racing some horses. So it's called Fair Demand. So a little bit of an unraced one there that's a while away. But I've always got a couple. And, Reese is always at me because I'm not in one with him yet. And Toby Late that I just mentioned's taking out his licence as well. So I'm sure those boys will tie my hands very soon.
I was just about to say to you, for those who don't know, you have grown up with Toby and Reese, and you're good mates with them and Maddie, obviously. So you're Bendigo based when you were younger?
Yep, grew up, born and bred in Bendigo. So I only met Reese through Toby. So Toby and I grew up together. And I'd been race calling at the picnics for a couple of years before Tobe was old enough to get his licence. So I remember calling Tobe's first winner at Yea for his old man. And that was probably the period of the picnics that I enjoyed the most because we'd go together sometimes and the boys were sort of having a bit of a crack, and Reese won a premiership and Toby nearly did, and we raced a couple of horses. And that was probably the era of the picnics that I probably had the most fun, to be honest, when the boys were riding. Maddie will hate me for saying that because she'll say I don't enjoy her riding now.
Absolutely. Maddie's having a ball and it's good to see her doing well. So you went to Bendigo Catholic College?
Yeah. Went through the Catholic system. So parents are good Catholics, and I didn't have much choice because dad was a teacher at Catholic College. So, and could you believe it? There used to... Yeah, so Dad was a woodwork teacher, and there were 2 woodwork teachers that you could get at Catholic College. So with a last name like mine, I just thought they would put 2 and 2 together and I would never get Dad. I got Dad every year, and Dad's tradie skills, fair to say, did not pay off on me, and I did need some help. And I used to put my hand up and just never get it. So he didn't want to favour me, but he almost did the opposite for someone that was hopeless and still is on the tools. So, no, that was a bit of fun. But, I was at school, but I sort of always knew that I wanted to get into racing and was always... Well, you didn't have, like, smartphones and that back then. So I used to take the radio on a set of headphones, and if I had a bet or wanted to listen to one of Dad's horses, I'd go to the toilets and listen to it. So... and teachers were always after tips, and they sort of knew where I was going. But if I could get a teacher that Dad had shared, he got a few of the teachers together and they raced horses together, and that probably helped me because they were always after a bit of info and were happy to let a few things slide when I wasn't concentrating too much.
that leads
So
on.
what was your inspiration to get into calling?
Well, apparently Dad used to do a little bit of it. Like, Dad grew up in St Arnaud's, so I think he'd occasionally call a harness trial, but not that I have ever heard Dad call or knew of that. So yeah, it's a funny question. Like, the radio was always on at home, as it probably is in many racing households, but for some reason I picked up on it. And I used to own a scooter, and Mum and Dad lived in a court, so the court was my racetrack, and I used to call races to myself. The neighbours probably hated me for it, but yeah, I don't know. I just always knew I could do it. I think if you're a race caller, everyone would say the same. You're sort of not born into it, but you don't just wake up when you're 20 and go, I want to become a race caller. I think you've either got it or you don't. And it's a craft that you probably knew that you had for a long time.
Yeah, good. Well said, Ben.
Remembering all the colours.
I get that a lot, and the answer that I give, Danny, is I don't have an exceptionally good memory. My mates will vouch for that, and so will my parents.
Terrible. I'd be hopeless. I am hopeless. You couldn't ask me going out in a race what barrier or who I draw next to. I remember as we're going in the gates, I remember. But I'm atrocious.
The answer I always give is I've never met a race caller who wanted to do it but didn't have the memory to do it. If you want to do it and you say there's 3,000 people on the front lawn and you need to remember these horses' names, whether you've got a good memory or a bad memory, you will remember them. But for people that mightn't know, I'll do the form the night before, because I'm interested and maybe trying to find something to have a bet on. But I also know that I'm sort of happy to put my tips out there. It gives people a gauge and a conversation point. I know that the jockeys and the trainers and the bookmakers and that have a look at them. And I actually also think it's a good habit, because if you do the form of a race, you will call the race better, because you will know what goes forward, what was a good run. You will know all those sorts of things. So I think it's good practice if I ever go on to call at a higher level, just to do the research the night before. But so I've done that, but I'm not learning the colours at that point. But in the back of your mind, you probably are, because you're watching a replay of horses, and the picnics is a smaller pool of horses. So like come this time of year, I do know a lot of them off the top of my head. But that learning process only begins when you jocks come out of the rooms, and then I just start memorising, and pretty well everything you got taught not to do in high school about cramming and then forgetting things is exactly what a race caller does. We cram for 10 minutes.
High school long enough.
And if Paul comes up in the box with me one day, he'll hear me, and I just talk to myself for 5-10 minutes and just repeat them over and over and over. And then by the time you've gone to the gates, so I've followed the jocks from coming out of the rooms to getting legged up to going to the gates. And by then I should know them. And then you want to forget them very quickly after the race, to be fair, because Troy will have 6, 8, 10 in on a day. Don will have the same, and it's not much use remembering the horse from the race before. So Troy and Don do keep me on my toes. I will say that. But it's funny, you forget very quickly. Like, I'll say in a race call that a horse of Troy's or Don's, not just those guys, anyone's horse might have ran on and ran a nice race or something, and then someone will pull me aside later in the day and say, oh, you noticed my horse running on out wide. And you don't always remember. You might have said a comment at the time, but you're trying to forget that race pretty quick and move on to the next one.
In saying that, Ben, some of Don Dwyer's horses at the moment have got the different colours. So that might be a little bit confusing for you. They've got the blue and the red.
That's a help. That's a help.
Is it really? Okay. They do stand out, don't they? You're very lucky, Ben, where you've got a passion for horse racing and calling, and you've got a job in the industry. So how did that come about? You got the job with racing.com.
Well, I never really wanted to go to university, but high school made you put in that you had a backup plan, I suppose. So I put down to do a media and comms course in La Trobe in Bendigo, which thankfully I never had to call upon. I was doing a bit of part-time work during high school at a company called My Stable. Anyone that gets the owner updates from the sort of bigger stables would know that it's sort of a comms website platform for trainers to use to get their comms out. So I worked there for a couple of years, coming down to Melbourne a few days a week and working from home a few days a week. That was good. We probably had 100 clients at the time, so just getting to know people through that. Although sometimes it was like working for Telstra because they'd ring you up and my stable will have crashed and you had to talk to them. So I've got respect for those people. But then a job come up. Admittedly, my brother sent it to me. I'm sort of probably not as forward as I should be in some of those cases, but a job at Moonee Valley come up in their content team. So I applied for that and got it. And I spent 6 years there and ended up being the racing and media person. So I got there the first year. Winks won her first Cox Plate. She was my first. And then Sir Dragonet with COVID was my last. So it was awesome. I had so much fun at Moonee Valley, and that Winks era was insane. Like, we used to have meetings in her third and fourth Cox Plates, and we just call them Winks meetings. And you'd talk about what you'd do, not if she won, but when she won, and what streamers you'd let off, and what music you'd play, and what you'd put on the big screen, and all this sort of. Like, you're talking about a Cox Plate, like. So it was pretty pinch yourself, and got to deal with Chris and Huey and that the whole way through. So it was good fun, but it was always interesting. I was working at the Cox Plate by day, and then I come home and do picnic form by night. So I think I've got a fair broad range of the spectrum for racing.
Yeah, they've got a broad understanding of it. So you were also writing for Winning Post for quite a number of years as well before you went on to do, and you've been broadcasting since what, about 2008 or 9, 10?
Yep. Started with the greyhounds and the harness just because that was easier to get a leg in the door. Dad used to train greyhounds before I was born, so he had a few contacts he could call upon. And then started doing some harness trials, but I always wanted to do the gallops. And then my first race call was at St Arnaud through a couple of old mates of Dad's that were on the committee when I was 14. And the first full meeting I called, I think, was later that year at Alexandra. So it just progressed through there. And I sort of come in at a time at the picnics, to be honest, that, Jack Styring, Bill Quinn, Victoria Shaw, Bill moved to Tasmania. Victoria sort of moved more into the greyhound side. Jack obviously retired. There was actually a shortage. So I come on the scene and was happy to just do my odd few races. And before I knew it, I was doing most of the circuit just because the clubs were ringing me with not many people. But that's the beauty of it now. I've got a couple of young blokes, Josh Harriott and Ethan Mills, and that you would have heard call a couple of races at Woolamai and Yea and that the last few weeks. And even though I'm not at the age where I'm willing to give it away, I don't want to stand in these blokes' way either. And I know how hard it is to get opportunities. So that's good. You always need young race callers coming through, and that's what's great about the picnics. Good for young race callers, good for, we've seen some jockeys go on and be pro jockeys. We've seen trainers learn their craft, stewards. Like, it's just a great breeding ground, stepping stone.
It's a great learning curve. It gives you exposure, and it gives you, it's a real taste of reality.
Yeah, and I think anyone that works at the picnics, anyone that works at the picnics, like the stewards that I see, like if I'm doing my job for .com and you see one of the stewards that used to go through, I think there's always a mutual respect there for when you work with someone at the picnics.
Absolutely.
And likewise, when I see the picnic guys at the races in my racing.com job, I think it just puts a smile on people's faces because we just all get up to this fun little sport on the weekend. Yeah,
that's right. We all get out to have a little bit of an adventure, and away we go. And it's a good bit of fun. And you're right, it is. It's an adventure, and we see how good we go. But so what's the best part about your job? What are some of the really good things, apart from Winks, obviously? But obviously you've gone out to interview all the big stables and all of those sorts of things. You've been to some pretty amazing setups.
You included, Danny, the other day with Splash of Paint.
It was pretty entertaining. It was awesome. Thank you.
I say that because that's probably the favourite part of my job. I love finding the story and the personality, and anyone that probably reads racing.com on a regular basis, if there's a story about a bush battler or something, they've probably half guessed I've written it before they've clicked on it. I just love finding that angle, and that's probably because I grew up as a country boy and I get to go to the picnics. And although, my job, as you say, I get to go to some wonderful studs and deal with the leading trainers and get to go and stable visit the best horses and that, it's actually those stories, the untold ones, that I actually enjoy telling the most.
Yep. So have you been to Kangaroo Island? Where else would you like to call from? You obviously had a trip over to King Island recently.
Yeah, I haven't been to Kangaroo Island, but Paul mentioned it before. King Island was great. It sort of grew from nothing. They were on their knees. Henry Dwyer decided to band in and help, but I've known Henry for quite a while. His cousin used to be my old boss at Moonee Valley. So, and he just sort of rang up and told me what he was doing. And I just loved it from the first time I heard of it. I thought, how good's this? 6 Ballarat trainers going to support racing community that's been going for over 100 years that's about to fall over. And thankfully for work too, like let's not forget King Island's run by Tasmania. So they could have clearly and easily turned their back on it and said, write a story, but leave it at that. And they said, no, happy to throw everything at it. And I got a nice little couple of days over there, which was a bonus, but absolutely loved it.
Food and wine would have been good over there too, wouldn't it?
Was awesome. Best steak I've ever had. I'm not a wine drinker, to be honest, but their beer was good, I can tell you that. But and their vodka was just as good at home. That's my change up. Those that know will know that. But great fun. Our old mate Chris Diplock was obviously over there, and the saviour. Of course, people watching this will know Chris, and he bought back. I actually tried to buy Chris's horse in the Calcutta for the Miners' Rest Cup. Which was the horse that ran at Woolamai last weekend in Alpine Skater. Unfortunately, it was too much money getting around on King Island with the likes of Bruce McAvaney and some of Kieran and Dave's biggest stones. So even though Alpine Skater was one of the outsiders, I couldn't rustle off a syndicate to buy him. I saved my money in the end, but I was sure that he actually ran some really good races in King Island. And when I saw him pop up at Woolamai, I thought, I think this horse will run a great race. And Ken Pitcher, who everyone would know on the picnics, he told me that 2 horses in 30 years had won with King Island form at the picnics, and I assured him that it would be 3. And fair to say, Lee Taylor, of course, is Jimmy's son, and Jimmy's the leading trainer in King Island, rode Alpine Skater. And he rode it a treat, and it come to the top of the straight, and I thought this will just win with the leg in the air, and it went backwards. So King Island is great, but the horses, I text Henry Dwyer actually on the way home, and I said, King Island form probably stacks up in King Island, and that's about it.
You know what? I've actually ridden one of those horses that had won in King Island, and I won on it for Peter Foster.
Yep, he gets a couple of them. Yeah.
Sebring Star, yeah. So there's one of the 2 that Ken Pritchard was probably talking about.
Yeah.
So
Ken's continuing to teach me lessons.
What's on your bucket list?
I don't necessarily have a calling bucket list. I've got a bucket list that is I want to get to every track in Victoria, and I've got 7 to go, I think. And I'm going to, so I think there's about 65 or something. So over the years, I've ticked up a few. I'm going to tick one off hopefully in a couple of weeks. Swiss Creek, I'm planning to get to. My good mate, Dean Murphy, of course, who's the judge and the photo finish. And we have so much fun together. If that person that you worked with wasn't great fun, you would struggle to enjoy the job because the callers' boxes are that tight that we pretty well live on top of each other. And
He's
Dino
an
has
absolute cracker. He's great value, Dino.
Dino has to put up with me most weekends. Yeah. So I have the idea that I'll maybe get a lift or something to Balnarring, and then Dino and I can push on together because he'll be, I won't be calling obviously, but Dean will be judging. He does them all. So, and maybe head up the Swiss Creek. So I haven't done any of the high country tracks. So I'll have to start ticking off a couple of them. I'm trying to get Reese Goodwin to go to Towong next weekend because that is also on my list. Unless Reese takes a horse, I just don't know how I'm ever going to get there. So it's a bloody long way from Pakenham though. So, but yeah, I've got about 5 or 6 to go. So not necessarily a calling bucket list, but I want to at least attend them all, and I'm nearly there.
So what were some of your other inspirations with your calling? Like you grew up in a great era with Jack Styring and that through the districts. Yep. Who else did you get to meet along the way?
I got to meet like Brian Martin and Greg Miles, and those guys admired them. They were sort of heroes like me as kids, and they were just great callers. It's sort of, Jack was famous for his one-liners, but it's funny that, and you would know, and anyone that watches the picnics, I have a few one-liners myself, but they're not.
They're not coming out with more and more too. So
yeah, but they're not planned they're not planned or scripted.
He's what is it? He's got his molars facing the breeze. That was one of his. And little Miss D Walker sitting quiet as a church mouse. I won on one at Colac one day, won by 10 lengths or something ridiculous. And he's got some rippers, but I have noticed there's a few more coming out with you.
Yeah, and the jocks reminded me of them as well, but they're probably just ones that I use that I like. I've actually never sat down in 15 years of race calling and sort of built a repertoire of them. I've never really given them much thought. I do have a little bit of fun, I must admit, with if Reese or someone has a horse in and Maddie stirs me up, I might try and come up with a little one-liner to pull the trigger on if Hayrick Lane or one of my horses has won in the past. But like Nan Curvis was a horse I had plenty of fun calling for Bet Weymouth. Of course, being Richmond, Paul, I had plenty of fun with Nan Curvis.
Absolutely.
Calls. And then like favourite horse, like I love calling Femme Americaine because she just comes from the back of the field and makes my job so much fun when she gets there. I think I'm as disappointed as anyone when she misses, but I try and have a bit of fun with it. If I was to go and call at a professional meeting, I would probably dial it back and you know, be a bit more you know, by the script, I suppose. But I think that picnic crowd wants that little bit of fun and enjoyment. They're there for a day out. But I do always appreciate too that the vantage points of the picnics aren't great. And my view is probably one of the better ones. So I do have to try and be as accurate as I can and tell everyone where their horses are, because you're probably relied on more so because you don't have TVs and big screens and multiple angles and that. So I try and have fun with it, but call accurately at the same time.
Just on that, Benny, we've only got a couple of minutes left, mate. So recently on Racehorses Australia Facebook site, there was a question asked. I don't know whether Danny saw it, and it said to people, who's the most underrated race claw in Australia? Quick as I saw it, I put in you, Ben, and it got a few likes from some picnic people. So they did see the comment. And I agree. I think you'd be wonderful at the TAB meetings, mate. And I hope you end up getting that opportunity, mate. But obviously that's going to be hard with work as well, because racing.com is your first preference. Now, our good friend here, Chris, Ben, he's been listening. He wants to be a race caller. But I said to him, first of all, mate, you got to start talking. Like, you know, he said he knows a bit of sign language, but I don't think it's going to help him. Can you give him any tips?
Can I give him any tips?
Apart from the obvious of talking.
Yeah, talking's a good start. Look, if I can do it, anyone can do it, to be fair.
Oh, don't undermine yourself, mate. Maybe when I come up in the box with you, maybe you can come up with us. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I just got my reservations about Chris because he's a Byron Bay boy, isn't he? And I've been to Byron a couple of times and it's not really my vibe. I'd struggle to spend a week in Byron. So the fact that he spent all that money on a house in Byron makes me question whether we'd actually get along.
You've broken him, mate. For the first time ever, you've broken him. I don't think he's coming back, mate. What have you done, Ben?
Of all the joints to build a house, I think Byron wouldn't be one of mine.
Maybe there's a particular reason of what Byron Bay's famous for that he's built.
Hasn't got a racetrack for start.
Well, that's
Absolutely.
True. All right.
No fun for any of us, let's be honest.
Benny,
thank you so much tonight, Ben.
You're a legend.
It's been a pleasure having you on. You could easily kick over into a two-parter, let me tell you.
Yep, absolutely.
And, it's really great to hear some of your stories, mate. Thanks heaps.
You're another one.
Thank you, guys, and look forward to seeing you both at Alex on Saturday.
I'll be there, mate. I'll be there. You'll be there too, Danny.
You'll be there. I'll see you Thursday first.
All right. Thanks, guys. Good luck tomorrow night at Pakenham, Danny.
Thanks, guys. Take care. Have a great week. Good luck calling and with work, Ben, and we'll catch up soon.
See you later.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys.
See ya. Bye.
See ya.